A good evening to you and welcome. Since I've spent a long time without getting together, because of the reasons explained earlier, you will bear with me if I take some time to engage you on a number of things, but also you will allow me to, in the biggest part of my speech to you, to speak from the heart. The 2 years we have not been able to meet, I'm sure so many things have happened. You have known here in Rwanda and where you come from, so many things happened. But the COVID pandemic found Rwanda was making decent progress in recovery from the history we all know that destroyed our nation. But that progress we made, and now we continue to make going forward after COVID. Well, it's not yet after. Who knows what is coming in the next months. But so far, so good. But my point was, we could not have made recovery and progress over the last 28 years without the resilient people of Rwanda, and equally so, the many friends and partners we have had accompanying us along the way. Many countries, many organizations, countries in Africa, countries in the north, developed countries have really helped. That one, I wanted to take this moment to say thank you for your contribution. And we want to continue on the same path of working together. We will always want to play our part, which is really what should come first as a people. Even before our tragic history struck, like it did in 1994, where we were a country underdeveloped and poverty-stricken and all kinds of things. But nonetheless, I want to assure you, we, as a nation, we are values-based people. We cherish values. I want to say that, because sometimes there is that mistake. People think we are a people, meaning Rwanda, but also maybe the continent of Africa. We are a people who need to learn values from others. I want to disagree, absolutely. I think, and I will speak for first my country, I know better, but I think it's the same with other African countries. We have where we come from, we have our problems, but when it comes to values, we have values, absolutely. So even with those weaknesses in our societies, we still cherish values. And I'm speaking for Rwanda here, we very much do that. And it is really based on that, as Rwandans, that we proudly want to play our part. We want to own up to our problems. We even expect to hold each other accountable and be held accountable by others. That one, there's no question about it. So that's what has helped, and I think things got much better since 28 years ago. Things got better for the country, and we want things to continue getting better for us. That is all about the investments we make every day, including the investments that come from those friends and partners I talked about. We want to invest well and invest so that we can keep getting better. In fact, that's why we're also not offended by anyone telling us that we need to get better. That's true. We want to be better. So we don't take offense when people keep pointing fingers at. And something else I want to emphasize is that we are people who respect. We are very respectful of others. Even if we may have differences for one reason or another, we maintain being respectful. In some way, of course, we expect that back to us. But again, even if people didn't respect us, we have no quarrel about that, because we concentrate on what we think we should do for ourselves. We have had a very tragic history, as I said. We have struggled, and we have concentrated on the side of our responsibilities. We did not choose to keep blaming others we could have blamed for our own problems. There are many who have a hand in our problems, but we don't take much time trying to apportion blame, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make us better. It doesn't make us stronger. It just takes away a lot of effort trying to throw around a blame to other people when we could be doing a lot for ourselves. So that's something else I wanted to. So even for those who every day have something to tell us, to teach us, the lessons we every day get from some of which we don't need or are not even correct, we still have no quarrel with that. Maybe we learn also one thing or two from that, and we continue moving ahead. Going back to who we are, and I just want to say this directly to you because you represent your countries, organizations here in Rwanda, I'm sure. You are interested in discovering one or two things here. But what I've just finished talking about contains some of the things that people will never maybe understand about us. But if they want to understand that, we might do better together. So for example, I'm saying this is the month of April when we have all kinds of problems. When we try to remember the history, the tragic history and so on. And you cannot overcome that history unless you emphasize truth and facts and interpret all that the right way, because there are things that we know, we have lived, we have seen, so we need to give them a correct interpretation and reading, and we try to do that. So sometimes it is striking to see that some people want to teach us who we are, worse still, who we should be. It becomes, that's where the problem comes in now. Even anybody trying to interpret our history for us, and their line of interpretation becomes the one we must follow. This is not correct, and we have a problem with that, absolutely. But again, even when we have a problem with that, we will always respond respectfully. I said it from the beginning. I tell you who I am, I tell you who I think I should be, and after that, if you have your own views, I listen to them, and we have to find a way of continuing forward anyway, because that's what we have to do. But I leave no one in any doubt that who I am, who I want to be, where I want to go, my views, my feelings about that will prevail always over these lessons that people may want to teach us about us. When I'm saying I, forgive me, it should be we, because I'm speaking for this country of Rwanda that I happen to lead today. And I want to do the best job of that while I'm still there. When I'm not there, I want those who will be there to, I think, do justice to our people, to our history, and also to our future, the future we want. You know, sometimes there's one case, single case, but which has a lot of meaning. You can read many things into it. You are aware of bringing celebrity status and hero status in our history. And people manufacture it through a movie, through a film. And take that even above the law. The law of our land, the law of our country, which actually would not pass the test of laws of other countries, even of those that think it should pass the test here in Rwanda. And expect us to, you know, there is a case which, I mean, I'm saying it is not a secret, everyone knows it here, where somebody belonged to, or created, or led several times back and forth, or groups, armed groups that been linked to genocide, and so we have them here in the court of law. It's absolutely surprising that people who have hundreds of years of history of this sort of thing I'm talking about, of justice, democracy, human rights, and so on, sometimes rightly give us many lessons. Getting it so wrong in this particular case. But I understand it's not just getting it wrong, like they don't know. It's getting it wrong because of who they think we are. They just look down upon us. While you can look down upon me, you can disrespect me to that extent, it's also my duty to make sure that I don't agree with you. I would seriously object. That's what Rwanda is and should be, for now and for the future. To absolutely object. So I see it every day, every now, you know, Minister of Foreign Affairs has to explain, the Minister of Justice, everybody. Me, I have to explain, you know, this one. So one time, some of these leaders you would have real respect for. One of them comes to me and say, you know, you see, you have to have this man released. I said, but I'm not the court, first of all. Second, even if I were to use my authority as a president, which would be abusing my authority, can you explain to me a little bit of why you think it should be the case that this man be released? And he would say, but you see, he's a hero, people say, it's like he's rivaling you, meaning me. I told this guy, I said, no, I'm not a hero. I don't even want it to be, because that's what I said during the commemoration, the 7th of April. This hero thing is, how can you be a hero in a situation like ours of a genocide where you lose? Well, I would have, one would have been a hero if we had prevented this from happening in the first place. But we lost a million people over. So I said, okay, fine. If you think it should be released, how about the families of the victims? People who were lost on the hands of this person and the groups he led that came and killed the members of their families. What do I tell them? And I said, because he was not even arguing from saying, no, this person is innocent. No, because the evidence there is overwhelming, including the evidence he provides himself. Because he talks about it. He talks about what he did. Very proudly. Now, so I said, so what happens? Would that be justice? What happens to these people? Oh, then this person said, oh, so they are there, they are victims. So we can also go on to them and say sorry to them, because I had to remind him that there are these victims. Then I said, okay, how about others co-accused with him? Because there are 20-something, around 20, who also testify and, first of all, accept their responsibility themselves and testify against this person because they were together in the same crime. He says, so what happens to this? Do we have this one released and these ones stay in prison and then the victims, we tell them to shut up? Or I said, that's not how you would do things in your own place. Why do you want me to do that you are telling me to do? Of course, he would have no argument, but he looks like saying, no, you should do it because I'm telling you to do it. Or because the story about this person concerns us. It's like we are the ones who made this person. Fact, which is true. They are the ones who created the status, celebrity status for this person. Because they wanted to build their own narrative about Rwanda, about us. So the effort is about changing victims to be the perpetrators. So there are two narratives as what happened here in reality in Rwanda. So there is a counter-narrative. No, it's not everything you see or you are told that is true. There is another narrative. And that's how this story goes on and on. It's not about the people who were targeted in the genocide. Even if 100 and something, all members of the UN General Assembly know the facts. One or two countries say, no, because other people died also. It's not just the Tutsis who died, it's the others. Now, that takes us back to find the interpretation. What do you mean when you're talking about a genocide? Is it just the numbers of people who have died? Or is it even the manner in which they died, being targeted for who they are? So what is the book you are reading about what happened here? Those of us who are here, who know, and everybody knows, how can the story change? Okay, but if you're saying, oh, even others died, that's okay, that's true. By the way, sometimes they say, no, but even moderate Hutus died, they still died on the hands of the same people who were targeting these ones. No, but not only that, actually some foreigners died here. We had Belgians died, Italians died, Americans died. There are many people who died here. So because you're saying, oh, even Americans died, even the Italians died in Rwanda, so it stops being this, what it should be called and what the UN has called it. It should be what we want it to be called. So we have to have the capacity, and we do, to really absorb this insult, I should say. We have developed the capacity to absorb it and live our lives and move along. We change what we have to change and live with what we have to live with. I just wanted to be clear so that, and let me tell you, sometimes there are certain things about us, about our history, about the core of who we are, that no amount of intimidation can work here. I just want to I know maybe some people know it already, but I wanted it to come from my own mouth and tell you that some of these things. And I really hope that even when I'm not there, that these other good Rwandans will stand up to this kind of challenge we face every day. I really hope so. And I'm talking to you as friends, as partners, but I think I need to say this, and I repeat it even some other times, because it really burns in me to say it. Sometimes I have to release it and let it go. That for this precious small land of ours, we've fought and bred for, and to put on the right path, and that anyone can come and of course, it becomes easier when they use Rwandans themselves. We see them every day, everywhere. But so because of that narrative, some people outside there trying to help amplify their nonsense. So I'll move forward. I want to clear something else that I'm sure you might have heard. Recently, there is some discussion we have entered into with one of our partners and friend, United Kingdom, something to do with migration. I know it has caused another confusion, and I want to explain it to you. And again, I first had to say what I said, and I bring this because it should be seen in that context of who we are and who we want to be. Because I have seen some people say, you know, that United Kingdom gave us money and then they want to dump people here. No, we don't do that kind of thing. we don't buy and sell people. We can't do that, again, because of our core values. But I'll tell you what happened, and so that everyone is clear in their minds. In 2018, if many of you may recollect, I was the chair of the African Union. And during that time, so many stories, you know, many young, maybe some of them old Africans were perishing, dying in big numbers in the Mediterranean, being taken through Libya and to many parts of Europe. And I remember reading a story about a Ghanaian young man, an engineer, who happened to be following this path, and there are people, there are smugglers, they have networks who take people from Africa, different parts, and smuggle them into Europe. And that time they were using Libya because of its statelessness. There was confusion, there was no state in control. And in fact, hundreds, if not thousands of them were trapped in Libya in different places in the prisons, starving to death, others abused in all sorts of ways. Some people had started coming, picking some of them and taking them to their countries to use them as slaves. Slaves. And we were somewhere discussing with some of the leaders, and I was telling them, why don't we address this problem? I said, for example, for me, I am not just going to suggest this theoretically that it can work. I want to even provide an example. I said, let's find ways. If we got all these people trapped in Libya who they can't go back to where they came from, they can't move ahead to Europe where they wanted to go. And I told them, I can assure you, with all our weaknesses and whatever we have in our country, these people, if they were brought through Rwanda, they would live a better life than they are living in Libya, in these prisons. And I said, so if we brought them, then other countries interested in helping in this program, we can do the following. One, we can ask these people whether they want to go back to where they came from, now that they found themselves mistaken and in a very terrible situation in Libya. They may end up wanting to go back home. Because I had read that story of the Ghanaian I was telling you, who was, for him he was an educated man, young man, but I think illusioned about. I think he was an engineer, the way I read it, but for some reason he wasn't employed. And so the networks that were smuggling people to Europe took him And when he was in Libya, he got stuck. He found he was not going forward. So he had paid some amount of money which he got from his parents. You remember the story we were talking about, $800 or $900 he had been paying through to these smugglers. And so he started negotiating with the smugglers to take him back, and he would pay the same amount of, again, same amount of money, which means 1,600 or 1,800. But this time he didn't have it. It would be paid when he got back to Ghana by, I think, his parents. So the smugglers took him back. But this is because he discovered there was no way of continuing to Europe. But even if he had reached Europe, by the way, I'm not sure, maybe what he had in mind he would become or was going to be the case. Maybe he was just going to be the same person as he was in Ghana, even in Europe, wherever he would be. He wasn't going to get that good living now. But anyway, so agreed, if they arrived here, they could easily be taken back home if they choose to go back home. Second, those European countries that have allowed migrants to come to Europe should come and stably select those they want to take to their countries, and that would be still better than these people being trapped in Libya. Then third, we provided another option. We said, for those who can't go back, or don't want to go back for some reason of their own, and may not be selected by the countries that want to absorb them, we are giving them another option. We can actually find ways in which they can stay here. There were these three options in 2018. So I think that's how now this new situation developed, with the UK and others contacting us. It's like they learned from this case and said, can we have people processed here stably instead of being smuggled into our countries and doing this and that? And this time, they are not just going to be Africans. They may be, a number of them Africans. They are going to be other people from other countries. We allowed people from Afghanistan to come here. Even now, there are still students who were brought here. They are still staying with us. So I'm saying there are things that have really changed about us. And that's why I'm saying we don't have to learn values from anybody ourselves. We have values in us that we go by. So we can absorb Afghanistan, people from Afghanistan, from wherever, and if they are from Africa, we are even happier because they are like, we take them like family. So when the UK approached us, and because of that problem they have, I think they are smuggling people in these countries, left, right, center. So if we could talk about how to deal with that problem, we are happy to deal with that problem. There is, I understand Denmark. So there is nothing bad about this. There is nothing we can't be transparent about this. There is nothing. So this is what it is. So, and this is who we are too. So I wanted to clear this, please. We are not, no, this is why I was saying there are things you can't buy about us. Yes, we are who we are, and we are proud people too. We are not, so we are not involved in buying and selling of people, Rwanda and the UK, or anybody. No, it's just a problem that people will have different views about it. They look at it differently. They are not happy about it. That's okay. People will have look at, but at the end of the day, you've got to do something. You have to decide which way you do, going through different processes, and in fact, in 2014 or 15, I predicted this problem. I don't know if anybody here remembers. I think we were in Amsterdam, and I was addressing Rwandans. It was Rwanda Day. Does anybody remember which year that was? I think it was 2014 or 20. And I told these Rwandans, they had come in thousands, about 5,000 Rwandans had come from the whole of Europe. And I asked them how they had come to Europe. Some of them explained, and I told them, I said, you know what? Some of you came here by telling lies. I said, there are some of you who came genuinely to Europe and were received. I'm happy for you. But there are many of you who told lies. I said, some of you told lies as victims of politics in Rwanda, others. I said, actually, some of you committed crimes in Rwanda. And then you come here as innocent people running away from something, from the evil government of Rwanda. I said, but one time, that's what I told them. I said, one time, this Europe you are taking advantage of. Because I think in Europe, I think you also have some confusion. Because they would, anybody who would, hey, you know, I'm dying, Kagame was going to kill me, and they say this is, yes, in democracy, freedom, you are saving this man. But this man has actually killed people in Rwanda. And he's just telling lies so that he gets to be accommodated in Europe. I told them that time, 2014. I said, one day, Europe will get to know this truth, I'm telling you. And they will come back to be asking each of you, well, how did you come here? And they will know the truth about you, and they will pack you in a container or something and send you back. I told them. Does anybody remember that conversation? Yes. I said they will come to know the truth because they have their own problems here as well. They want to manage. I don't think we are going to transfer half of Africa into Europe, and Europe accommodates it and keeps silent. So they wake up and say, what is this? And I told them, I said, by the way, why are you actually going there? Why don't you try and together we do things like they do in Europe where you are running to, so that you stay in your countries. In fact, in that meeting, there were some people, there were some Malians, people from Burkina Faso, and others from Senegal. I remember when it came to Q&A, they were asking me questions. They put up their hands and they told me their stories and how they lived in Europe. In fact, one another person at that time was from Cameroon. He was a doctor, and he told me he had come from Belgium, and he said, you know, I have heard so much about Rwanda, you know, I want to come and work in Rwanda. I'm a medical doctor. He has some good specialty. I said, either I will leave you with a ticket, or I bring you on my jet and you go home. And this man has come, by the way. He's here. He's working here now. He's working in King Faisal Hospital. Yes. So there are these things people don't know, don't understand, or don't want to believe, but I thought I needed to say it. Yes, people need to understand us and understand the situation between us and them and others. But and I wanted to emphasize, we learn lessons, we do, but we learn the lessons we have to learn. In fact, I hope in the UK, when they send these people, they should send to us. Some people they have accommodated for over 15 years who committed crimes here, actually. We sent case files and, you know, investigated. These are clear case files. Yes. Instead of being accommodated in that beautiful place in the UK, these people should be in jail, either in the UK or here. But they shouldn't be, because that is for sure. There are about 5 or 6, I don't remember the number. So, and again, to prove to you that we are people really, that people should understand us better. You are aware that even when we were dealing with the worst situation anyone had to deal with, do you remember that is a time we actually abolished death sentence, right? Why could we have done that? You think anybody forced us to do it? Because those who could have forced us, or who sometimes make a mess of things like this, for them they still have death penalty in their laws. They still hang people. And I don't think there is anybody in the world, at that time we abolished the death penalty, had better justification to hang people like we did have justification. Nobody. Yes, we're dealing with mass murderers. So, but realistically, we're even saying, but how do you hang 1,000 people? We said this hanging of people, like some people do, is just, or how do you hang some and leave others when it is the same crime they have committed? So we decided to abolish the death sentence. Isn't this remarkable, in my view, that the people of Rwanda decided that death penalty be abolished at the wrong time? The worst time. This was the time not to do that, because there was urgency to actually hang people for killing our innocent people. So I'll just say a few, but I thought I needed to offload some of these things on you and so that they don't remain in my chest. So I'm sure we are better people, we are stronger people, we can be good partners with all of you, those who want us, want partnership in us. We are happy and ready, but I just wanted to be sure that you understand us and the values around which we form partnership be clear. And that's what they are. So we, as some people said, we are going to host the Commonwealth heads of government meeting here in Rwanda, and for those who are members of the Commonwealth, and I wanted to say your country delegations, your leaders, we will do our best to make them feel welcome to Rwanda and for this meeting. And we have a lot to accomplish together. In our case, we always strive to use the resources, limited resources available to us, the best way we can, and get value for our money. So, once again, thank you so much for joining us for this dinner, and I want you to be happy in our country, and as we continue this same journey, we have a lot to do, and for us, again, we've been focusing on how we can make peace and create peace with our neighbors and in our region, and we will continue.